Hi there, welcome along. We're doing another sci-fi chat podcast here. And as always, I'm Jennifer Kirk, and with me...
I'm Zoe Kirk Robinson. I wasn't sure what you were doing that, but you were going to grab me. And we're here on the Sci-Fi Chat podcast, hashtag... I can't even do it. And we're here on the Sci-Fi Chat podcast, hashtag Sci-Fi Chat podcast, which we do fairly regularly when we have things to talk about.
We've just been ever so busy. I mean, I've just come back from Worley, and it seems every weekend that I've got so much on. So we've kind of let it slide a little bit.
Yeah, we really shouldn't, but we have, and that's unfortunate.
But we were chatting today, and we felt that we really needed to discuss a particular topic we thought of relevance, not just to science fiction, but essentially this is of relevance to any hobby out there. And we were just, discussing upstairs about this, and we thought it was a really interesting topic.
Shall I explain what it was?
Yes, you shall.
Okay. I read in a newspaper a couple of months ago this concept that people in the 20s and 30s, maybe even early 40s, generally don't have hobbies anymore. And we were talking about why that was. So, Jennifer, why do you think people don't have hobbies anymore?
The two reasons that immediately spring very much to mind are, number one, space. Modern houses are tremendously small, and it really brings home to you when you go and visit somebody who's got a brand new house, very proud of this. Oh, look at this, we've just bought it, it's brand new, nobody else has lived here before. And when you compare it to the house that we've got, it's like... Ooh.
Which is from the 1930s.
No, 1920s.
1920s, so it's even older.
This house was built in 1927.
So it's a very different thing to a modern built house, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, we get a lot of space in here, and you can see just a corner of this room behind us. This room's a library. In a modern house, you really wouldn't get the opportunity for that. So space becomes very limited, because you've also got to fit in all of your regular everyday things like your kitchen, your dining area.
A sofa.
A sofa.
You've got to have somewhere to sit down.
So generally speaking, there's just no space for anything, and that puts a crimp on a lot of different hobbies. And secondly, cost. A lot of hobbies have become very expensive, and one of the cruxes of what we were discussing was the way that certain hobbies... the supply of materials has changed. That's made it much harder for new people to get into these hobbies.
Yeah, the entry point has changed. I was talking about gaming and retro gaming, especially because my hobby is retro gaming. I collect old computer games and things like that. And I realised that if you wanted to introduce your kids, for example, to a computer that you'd had when you were their age, it would be very difficult for you to do that now. The computers themselves are fairly expensive. As you would expect, supply and demand, there's not a huge amount of working ones left, which is unfortunate. But the tapes and the discs and things like that you would have loaded those games off to show your kids, may not work anymore. Now, I've been very lucky in that respect, because a lot of my old cassette games and an awful lot of my old discs still work, but they have been stored very well, and that's not always the case. Especially if you bought them through the post, and they've gone through Royal Mail or Parcel Force or whoever, and they've scanned them at some point. There's a chance that they've become wiped or corrupted. So the chance of you getting this stuff is hard, which means a lot of people wouldn't bother in the first place. But if they did want to persevere and decided, well, the cassettes and the discs aren't brilliant these days, they're not reliable, so I'll get an SD card reader and I'll go down that route, where do you get them from? Now, personally, I know you can go to somewhere like Sell My Retro and eBay and places like that, and you might find one or two, but there aren't very many, because they're basically made to order. A few may be made on a speculative basis, like here's some that I've got, but you can order if it's not the particular type you want. But which ones do you get? Which ones will work best for you on your particular system? And are you willing to shell out 50, 60, 80 pounds for one of these devices?
And I think what it comes down to is availability. It used to be the case, and to talk about one of my hobbies, the model railway collecting.
You collect model trains? My goodness.
Does it show? But when I was young, you could just walk into a model shop, and everything that was in the catalogue was there. You didn't have to carpet bag everything as it came out. It was just a case of, oh, I want X, Y, and Z, it's there. Now things are selling out. It's become almost a wacky races. And that can be very off-putting for somebody new to the hobby. The example I gave was, I want to make up a train of particular coaches, but they're not all available because they're produced in limited batches, and people pile in, and all the second opens all get sold. So all you're left with is break seconds and maybe a first corridor. And before you know it, people are like, well, if I can't get what I want, then you lose interest in a hobby very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking as well about the example of the last box opening and review that I did on the channel. It was a particular locomotive, and it was just sold out everywhere. And this was actually brought home to me when I was at Worley, that on the Sunday, I didn't really see any for sale because it would appear that they're all sold out. And, that doesn't help accessibility into a hobby. Yeah, fine for people who've got loads of money and can do that, but they're very much the minority, and it doesn't bring anybody new into the hobby, and the hobbies tend to die out. And thinking back to the 1980s and even into the 1990s, I can remember the sorts of hobbies that people had that you just don't see much evidence of anymore. Stamp collecting, but also thimbles, those little sort of porcelain ornate thimbles.
Yeah.
I remember loads of people having collections of those, having them in cabinets on their walls, and you don't see that anymore. And it led to the discussion, what are people doing with their time? And I think as well, maybe it's a third reason, is the rise of the internet. A lot of people, they'll just veg on the internet. They'll hang out on social media, on fora, and there's no doing anymore.
Yeah, hanging out is the thing. And I think when you've got such a limited amount of space, how can you have a hobby of collecting, which has been the big hobby for centuries? That people would have a butterfly collection, a coin collection, a stamp collection, a thimble collection. People collected novelty souvenir spoons. Just a standard spoon, a teaspoon, with a picture on it of where they'd been.
Yeah, I remember places used to sell stuff like that. I can remember going to places like Southport as a child, and in the souvenir shops you could get your spoon from Southport.
Because people collected them. They didn't take up too much space. You could display them. They looked nice when they were displayed.
Do you remember the novelty pencils as well? The oversized pencils. That used to be a thing. So I remember people collecting those. They were hideously unusable. I mean, you could write with it, but sharpening it was a bit of a chore because they didn't sell pencil sharpeners to go with them.
So it's things like that. People used to collect them, but when space is a premium, how can you do it? So we were talking, and a lot of people who don't have hobbies hang out.
Yeah.
They hang out with friends, they chat, they watch TV, they go to the cinema, they go out drink and things like that. That has become what people do. It's very interesting how the society's changed.
I mean, it's something as well I've seen said about younger generations, that it's not become about materialism anymore because of these reasons. It's become about experiences. And a lot of people will go on holiday. They'll go and do these like bungee jumping or base jumping or escape rooms, things like that. And it becomes simply about collecting experiences as much as anything. And it means that people just don't have stuff like they used to.
Yeah. It is very interesting how society's changed. How does this fare for science fiction? Because I can think of, from my point of view, how it's affected science fiction as a book publisher.
Yeah, what people don't buy books so much anymore. So, and what I found is that far from democratising publishing, it's actually very much polarised it. So it's very difficult. But it's never been easier to put a book out as an ebook. That has become very easy. But to get people to buy it, you've become lost in the chatter. And all of a sudden, it's become much harder to find new writers, and people tend to be focused in more and more on just what they know, the big names. And you can go and browse somewhere like Waterstones or on Amazon, and you can't find a lot of this so-called democratized publishing. It's just not there to find unless you know about it and hunt for it. And
Yeah.
it's never been more difficult to have your voice heard. And I'm guessing that this, like music, has probably gone that way as well. And film, I know a couple of people who are film producers, and I know about their films because I see posts from them. I know what they're up to. But those films, you never see them in the cinema. You never see DVD releases of them. You never see them on television.
So would you say that even though you know what those films are, I probably don't?
No, you wouldn't.